Hi everyone, and welcome back. A couple of months ago now, I shared that Gandalf is doing a dietary elimination trial to see if it helps with his skin condition, and today we'll take a look at how it's going. When Gandalf saw the vet back in September last year, she suggested that some of his problems could be due to intolerance to something he was eating. He developed runny eyes and was very itchy, as well as having a poor coat. In part one, I talked about the science behind the elimination trial, and in part two, I shared an update on how it was going for him and how we were coping. We'd had a few issues, mainly caused by his particular quirks, and also complications from trying to do this with other dogs around. And I'll link those down in the comments. And I'll link those down in the description if you'd like to take a look. Today, I'd like to talk about how we got on after that. Unfortunately, not long after I recorded that last video about this, 4 weeks into the trial, we had a bit of a setback because his supply of special tinned food ran out. We still had the kibble, but no wet food. And if you watch part two, you'll see that we were needing to use that wet food for some of his activities to replace things he had outside of meal times. And rather than restrict him to eating only kibble in that time until the charity was able to provide a new supply, I decided to give him an alternative to move him back onto something he'd been having before he started the trial, because that seemed better for his state of mind rather than keep missing out. It kept him happy, and there was no immediate change in his condition. But for the purposes of the elimination trial, it was a setback because you're supposed to count 8 or 12 weeks on the diet with nothing else. And of course, we'd had to introduce this other food for what ended up being about a week. Over the trial, one thing I've learned is just how many calories he must have outside of his normal meals, and how many calories he must use up and above what is recommended. So I went onto the website for the supplier or the manufacturer of the special diet he was on, and they had a useful calculator which allowed you to work out exactly how much a dog of that weight was supposed to have of their food. And I fed him that amount, and within a few weeks he'd lost 2 kilos. And that is not good news for a greyhound. Rather than allow that to continue, I did increase his portion size at meal times, and normally he would have made up any deficit at meal times with his treats, but of course we weren't able to have those extras, so we had an extra complication there. So we covered the problems we were having with our enrichment activities and so on in part two, and those are some of the extra calories he was having, and we needed to keep that up. It made it very clear just how much non-meal intake is part of his daily ration. They've always said that we tend to underestimate how much we eat. So if we're on a diet, we think we've just had a small amount of something and we've actually had loads of calories. And I think the same must apply to dogs as well. So if you have a dog that you need to reduce the weight of, then do have a think about how much they're having outside of meal times. It's not necessarily just about reducing what they get in their bowl at dinner time, but it's about all those little extras that they have around then. Typically, all of my dogs would have had something chewy at least once a day, partly as a treat and partly to help with their teeth. And keeping Gandalf away from forbidden food was particularly difficult to manage. He looked so sad if the others had stuff and he couldn't, that I felt really mean not being able to give him anything. So no one ended up getting them for that time, which probably didn't help any of them be terribly happy while he was on this diet. I'm not sure that any of them were impressed that all those yummy treats were hidden away upstairs. But what was I supposed to do when Gandalf couldn't have one? What were we supposed to do? Even toast was a problem. The editor had to sneak a bit of the treats I was making out of Gandalf's kibble and wet food onto his plate alongside the pieces of toast that he saved for the other dogs, so Gandalf didn't feel left out at toast time. However, on the plus side, I did notice within a relatively short space of time that his dandruff was improving. His skin condition was better, his coat is sleeker and still is, which I hope you can see here, and it's less starey. There hasn't been a great deal of change in his watery eyes or in his itchiness, but it's been hard to tell about that because he has been having an injection to control the itchiness while we went through this trial. So it's hard to be sure, but I do think the initial signs were promising. I meant to record this update a few weeks back, but we've been having a few other problems and quite a lot of upheaval with him over Christmas. And the apple cart got well and truly upset in more ways than one. And I'll tell you about that next time because it's a bit much for one video. So that's all for today. We'll be back again soon. Bye for now.